Welcome to the portal to New Sovereign Earth. Join us as we collectively shift realities and shatter paradigms. I'm your host, Kalina Lux. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn notifications on. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of The Portal. I'm really stoked today because today we have the opportunity to speak with a guest that and from what I understand, has never been interviewed, has always been deep anon, but he is coming forward today because it's time. It's time that we bring privacy and the awareness around these topics to the forefront. Today, I am speaking with TechLeaks24, and he is a crypto enthusiast, a full-time trader, activist, and tech journalist. Now, I have seen his work in the DERO space, articles on privacy, and I have to say his work really is groundbreaking. In fact, I just read one of his first earlier articles just now, and I am late to this podcast interview because I decided that we needed to really dive into this particular article at length because it is absolutely mind-blowing what he's presenting and bringing forth. And so TechLeaks, welcome to the portal. I'm very grateful and honored to have you today. Could you tell us a little bit about what a crypto enthusiast is?
Yes. Hi, Kalina. And first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor for me to be in your show. And also thank you for all you do for DERO. As a DERO enthusiast, I really appreciate it. A crypto enthusiast is someone who has, I think the easiest way to define it would be as someone who has survived the crypto jungle. I have not been navigating this space since 2013, but from the outside, because I was a student back then and I had no way of buying Bitcoin because I didn't have my own credit card, and my parents wouldn't give me their credit card to buy Bitcoin because it was shady stuff, you know. And then since then I got full-time involved in 2017. And since then I've been just surviving, you know, navigating the space.
Excellent. Yeah. So you mentioned here I believe in one of your bios, are you in fact a full-time trader?
I mean, a full-time trader implies like I don't have a fund, but that's what I do full-time. Crypto is my job. I like to think of myself more as an activist because I turned into an activist because my background, as I said, in 2013, I was a student, then I bootstrapped my finances by working in marketing. And then in 2017, I decided to put all my savings into crypto. And then as I navigated and started looking for new frameworks to evaluate projects or to identify new projects that were underrated and could benefit from my experience, or not as an employee of the project, but as an enthusiast, that I would always try to build a position and then be a team player with everyone else and help raise the project's profile with my efforts and with my contributions.
Okay, that's awesome. So what has been like your moral compass, I guess, for choosing or selecting these kinds of projects that you want to put your energy behind?
Yeah, that's a good question because it has changed. The way I evaluate projects has changed through the years, especially in 2000, I almost went bust because that bear really hurt me. I was still relatively new to the world of speculation in crypto. I had no idea how painful these and how unpredictable these bear markets can be. But somehow I was also lucky, like the market presented me with an opportunity and I got back on my feet very quickly. So since then, I became some sort of BTC maximalist for 1 year in 2020. And then after that, with the COVID crisis, that shook me. That changed completely my way of viewing crypto. Like from an inflation hedge, I realized we have much bigger problems than inflation in this world. And there are the crypto, decentralization, permissionless, and anonymity, privacy. I prefer to say anonymity because I like a zero compromise approach. Can be a really positive, can bring really good, big positive changes in today's world, in all the various corners of the world where they have to deal with all sorts of statist forces, let's say, or liberty limiting forces. So I try to pick projects that are aligned to these principles of decentralization, of permissionlessness, and of privacy. Let's use this word because it's the most vastly used. So this is how that has been my compass, let's say, since 2020.
Amazing. Yeah. And so once you shifted into a more privacy, sovereignty based types of value set, is that kind of when you found DERO?
Yeah, exactly. That's when I found out about DERO. Because, I mean, to be honest, before finding out about DERO, pre 2020, I used to think I was one of those guys who used to think that privacy is shady, is understood the value proposition of privacy while I was young, because I come from a traditional family, like education and stuff in the system. So I was very, let's say, I had a tunnel vision on privacy up until 2020. And when 2020 hit me in my everyday life with all the changes that we all lived in different parts of the world, that opened my eyes that, as I said, inflation isn't our biggest problem, and that there are a lot of things at stake, much more important than inflation, like our personal freedom, our liberties, our freedom of speech, freedom of will. And all these things, the only way to protect them is by protecting our data. And that's when I found out about DERO. Many people recommended it to me as a breakthrough tech, as a notch higher than all the other projects that made up the landscape up to that point. And the more I researched, the more I liked it. I also saw a huge opportunity because I felt like the market was being unfair to it. So that's what drove me, it pulled me in even more. And then I kept researching and joined the community, and I liked it more and more.
Okay, literally, I was getting goosebumps, like chills, when you talked about how multiple people recommended DERO, because DERO is so unknown and it's such a rare hidden gem. Nobody knows about it. So the fact that multiple people recommended DERO to you is it shows like the synchronicity and the higher intelligence of this beautiful construct that we live in. But let's kind of stay on track, and I won't get too far off in the spiritual world. But yeah, the same thing happened with me. Multiple people in different types of areas of my life all kind of like, told me about DERO at once, and it just never left. It never left my consciousness. So I'm grateful to connect with people like you now, because I do feel like the more and more that we're starting to connect, and now, we're going to have Nonsensus event, which will be the first ever privacy focused blockchain conference, which I'm super stoked about. And I think that we're starting to create this gentle awareness in the background of like the collective consciousness of humanity. And this will slowly kind of like grow and build in strength, because it's all foundational. And without all the other stuff is, like you said, pseudo-anonymity. And I'm happy to connect with you on these topics. Would you say that DERO is now your favorite project? Like, is that your top number one favorite project?
Absolutely. That's why I'm even doing this interview. And I've been in DERO for a long time, for almost 2 years now. And I never get involved in a project so early in the production cycle, when, for example, it's still, products are still, the software is sort of experimental or very new. Like DERO mainnet was launched a bit more than a year ago. DERO is really new. DERO Stargate, which is the one that uses homomorphic encryption, true disruptive version of DERO, I like to say of it. And ever since, honestly, I keep searching, I keep looking for new projects. I'm always looking around, because, as I said, that's my routine, always searching, digging, asking people, looking around. And I haven't come across anything that comes even close to DERO's value proposition and to DERO's execution, like what DERO has built, Captain, the core team, whoever they are, one or many, all of them together, they have built, I think, something amazing. And whoever I've shown it to that had even a bit of technical background was truly amazed and jumped on board immediately. They all went straight to buy some DERO, just in case.
Okay. So I would love to ask you and pick your brain on this subject, because as you know, I come from a different background, like a non-technical background. Of course, I've learned a little bit on my journey in DERO, which I'm grateful for. But I think that my audience is still greatly in like the spiritual type of energy of it. So intuitively, we can understand that something like DERO is needed, and we can feel the resonance of the community. But from your perspective, you come from a purely technical perspective. Can you talk about some of the things that are unique to DERO in the most layman's term possible? One of the things that I when I first reached out to you months ago to ask you for an interview, it was the way you were able to express high level technical concepts in ways that really worked for entry level non-techie people. And I feel like this is one of your skills that is extremely valuable. So could you introduce DERO to people that have maybe never heard of it in a technical but yet easy to understand way?
Right. Yes, of course. To be honest, like I don't have a technical background, but as I said, since I research these things, and after a while, I'm able to, let's say, break things down. But pertaining DERO, I always like to start from the fact that it uses homomorphic encryption, because this is an expression that, at least in Europe, it's very popular. People know of it because it comes up often in the discussions about privacy and all the laws, regulation, and so on. So here, people on average are familiar with this expression. And then what DERO is basically is a form of money that is truly untraceable. But here, for whoever listens, depends on your cultural background. As I said, I was among those that thought of privacy as shady, as traceability. Many people are conditioned of thinking of traceability as a good thing. But if you study privacy, if you study the importance of privacy and protection of data, it's basically as if you think of life of the open market where we operate, where we work, where we sell, buy, and trade, as a poker game. And imagine a lot of people come to this poker night and they are convinced, they are manipulated into believing through free drinks and free food and music that you don't have to worry about covering your cards because nobody's going to look at them anyway. You just play along because nobody's going to pay attention at your cards. And whenever you join the market with this attitude, you end up losing. You lose money, you lose your job, you lose your house, you lose your wealth. Slowly it starts getting eroded, and you don't even know how exactly that happens, because it's very difficult to find out what exactly is being exploited. However, DERO is like protecting your cards, your hands, so that you can play. And sometimes like luck can be against us, at times can be in our favor, but it's important to take our chances fairly, right, in our life, in business, and everywhere else. So something like DERO allows you to maintain your edge, to have an edge that is the right of every single human being. As long as you participate in a free economy, you have the right to disclose the data or your finances, etc., on a need-to-know basis. You shouldn't be surveillable. They shouldn't be able to see how much money you have in your bank account, so that later they can threaten you to fire you because they know that you have no choice but to comply because you don't have enough savings. You shouldn't. Your privacy, your data, like for example, your family wealth or where you are from when you go in a foreign country, or all your background, technical or not, that thing shouldn't be available to anyone or surveillable, because then it affects the way they treat you, because maybe you are not a local, so they think that they can pay you less for the same job, maybe. So all these things, and in Europe, the people I've spoken to, students and staff, awareness of these issues is increasing, even among universities and stuff, that anyway, these big databases render us very easily blackmailable. So protecting our data is important. And the only way to do it is encryption. Any other way today requires trust in a third party, or trust that someone will not sneak peek at your cards. So DERO is the only solution in this sense, because it is entirely encrypted and no part of DERO is unencrypted. So there is no way to trace how your money moves. There is no way to know what you buy, because what you buy, for example, can say a lot about you as a person. If you use Bitcoin, I can see that you buy online, you buy gift cards from what merchant, so I can find information about you. But DERO is entirely encrypted, so in a way, it allows you to take your chances fairly in the open market. And the more it grows, the more empowering it is going to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, very well said. In your article, which I'd love to pull up here in a minute, you mentioned how the pseudo-anonymity of Bitcoin, it really favors those who have a lot of resources or power, because for the common person like you and me, we don't have access to being able to scrape all that data, but governments, billionaires, criminals, like those people do. And I really like your example about the cards. It's like, sure, in one hand, we are shifting into a world where integrity is like the law of the land and everybody has that. But while those people that aren't able to self-govern aren't there yet, I do think that it's most wise to take these kinds of precautions, particularly when the people that have the least amount of integrity are those that we've entrusted to govern us and to, impose rules on us. And here they are taking advantage of all that by, manipulating data. And I really liked your schematic on the decision-making process and how people can be socially engineered. I just don't think people really understand the extents that these organizations have gone to, quote, mitigate their risk, how you put it in your article, to actually, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but yeah.
To control basically people.
Thank you.
If I may interrupt you, I don't know if it's a very important point that you brought up here, and I also elaborated it in my article, because as I said, a lot of us, society is organized nowadays in a way that people of the upper echelons not only protect their property, but they want to abolish the rights of people who maybe start from the bottom and are willing to put in the work, because they consider their success odds a threat to their own, because they are in a free market. Wealth at some point gets redistributed, because of course some people perform for a while and it's only normal. Like anyone who has had a business knows this, that a business lasts for a cycle and then you have to come up with something new. It cannot go on forever, right? Because the market changes, the world changes. But what happens nowadays is this top-down effort that is done by governments and all the powers, the dark powers behind them that have access to these politicians, that create laws and create rules and stuff that are very asymmetric and that affect us, people who start from the bottom. They put us in little boxes and they make us very easily manageable. And as I said, these processes are so complex that we are not even aware of how we are being manipulated. With the internet has helped a lot. These now means of communication are much more diversified. But the more you know about me, the easier it is for someone to manipulate me. Because if you know who my favorite singer is, then you can make my favorite singer say something that is not aligned to my beliefs, and you can affect me that way, and you can influence my train of thought. So you can manipulate me through my favorite athlete, through the singer, or through my favorite writer or intellectual or medical figure. So this is what we saw basically during the COVID crisis. Like, the manipulation was on many levels. And in my opinion, for me, I learned this very well. And a lot of people, a lot of my friends finally saw the light. It helped a lot of people see the light, that the COVID crisis exposed how easily manipulatable we all are. It's like a food chain. You first manage to manipulate those that are higher up in the influence tree, and then that thing propagates down to the smallest person, to the smallest child, to the small. So this is scary in a way, because it can rob us of our will, of our right to choose what we believe is best for us. And the best way to do this, as I said, is to try to take care of our data, to protect our data, and also to develop our sense of a sovereign individual, and to acknowledge that there are many unknown unknowns, many ways in which manipulation can happen. So there is no way on earth why we should receive the moral compass from outside, but should just follow our own process of growth and empowering and of awareness, increased awareness of where we want to go and what we want.
Yeah, thank you for that. Excellently said. And it's interesting because they've really done a good job over the millennia of conditioning us downward in our intellectual abilities, really training us to be dependent on our social circles for what we think and what we believe in. Even this idea of peer reviewed, I think that, well, obviously it's been abused, but we have a lot of those types of mentalities running rampant in our society. And not a lot of us have the courage to just be like, wow, my internal compass says this, and I am standing here, and I don't care who thinks that I'm, whatever. This is my truth. And I have the utmost of respect for individuals that are able to do that, especially in today's society, because it's unheard of. Like, it's very rare. It is less than like 0.1% of the population on earth that have the ability to do that. So I would love to share your article. Right? Like, let us pull up your article. I believe I've got it already here. Here we go. Okay. And I'm going to turn my camera off just because. Perfect. Here is your beautiful article that you wrote. And I think that the title is just such a, man, it's a showstopper. It's a slam to all these little crypto projects that are like, ooh, transparency, blah. So his title of the article is Why I Believe the Destigmatization of Anonymity, Not Pseudo-Anonymity, is Inevitable. Privacy coins will stop being a, quote, shady niche, and the only 100% anonymous layer ones out there, DERO, is primed to outperform. Now, that title really packs a punch. And, I love that you say that you came from a transparency background, because who better than you to speak to those people that are still like, even I live in Puerto Rico, as you guys know, and a lot of people here are into crypto and they are just drinking the transparency chain Kool-Aid. And my thing to them is like, hey, look, dude, you really think that those shady organizations are going to still play by the rules and that you're actually going to, quote, hold them accountable to do the right thing with your tax money? No, dude, it's never going to happen in a gazillion years. They'll find ways. They'll be using DERO and we'll be using, Ethereum. So what is your answer to somebody who is still drinking the transparency chain Kool-Aid?
My answer is that the transparency chain Kool-Aid, according to which we are supposed to control how governments manage our money if they use a transparency chain, is that's extremely expensive and not possible for us, because to analyze the chain and to analyze it when you know that the other party might be taking steps to hide there, to not leave any footprints behind while they do all the dirty stuff like mixing coins and stuff, it's extremely expensive for us single individual citizens to go after them that way. Whereas it's extremely cheap for them, for a government, to monitor every single move we take on a transparent blockchain. So this asymmetry invalidates the argument that we need a transparent blockchain for everyone, because this way everything is auditable. No, not everyone is auditable that way. You are auditable if you are small, but someone who is more resourceful than you, like, for example, a billionaire, a criminal, a government, is not auditable, because a government can hide their tracks, can afford to take precautions that allows them to hide their tracks on the blockchain, to not leave traces behind. Same for other major players that are very resourceful. Whereas you and me, we will actually be open books. They will be able to know everything about us, what we drink, how we spend, where we go. So this thing opens up a world of possibilities for whoever is in power to manipulate our free will, to manipulate our success odds in the open market, because just for a government, but also for an employer, also for a potential business partner, also in any negotiation. We constantly conduct these negotiations with the government, in business, with our employers, or with our potential people we want to hire. There is a negotiation, an ongoing negotiation, and you cannot negotiate if the other party knows everything about you, because then in every single negotiation, you will always get exactly what you are willing to accept, exactly what you need. You will never get a bit more, and the other party will get everything they can take, not everything they would be happy with. So to avoid this asymmetry in every negotiation in our lives, because we are always negotiating, be it when we pick a political candidate, be it when we decide to start a business, how to start it, where to start it, be it when we decide to reject or accept an offer, reject or accept, let's say, a request by our employer for more work, or, like, for example, for the vaccines or for some other medical treatment. So all these things, all these cases, we as individuals would be much more empowered if our data was was protected. Because when that data is not protected, then those people have the ability, as I explained in this article, to change the optics, to change the way how we look at things. For example, as you said, there are very few people nowadays who can take difficult choices. And as you guessed, I have taken some very difficult choices in my life that for my friends are unimaginable. They tell me, you are the only one I know who would have taken this risk, who would have done this thing, and worked out in the end for me. I mean, I managed to stay afloat despite all the risks and stuff. And one of these things was, for example, to realize that the whole educational system is a fraud, because they basically want to create some sort of sheep, or let's say people that have been conditioned to believe that they must receive orders from above them, and that they must comply at any cost, and they must be happy with whatever job they get, salary they get, and not pretend and not, let's say, aspire to have more or to be ambitious and stuff like that. So in this world, realizing that the odds are not so much against you, that actually if you decide to take a risk, the society as a whole wants to manage its risks. So they want you to be parked somewhere safe. But if you decide to take a risk, odds are not so much stacked against you as you are conditioned to believe. So this thing is a way of empowering people, of taking more risks, of taking their chances in life, and of not feeling stuck somewhere or in some job and so on and so forth. So this opens up a whole new world of possibilities and brings, in my opinion, positive change in people's life. So in this sense, this is where I see DERO, all these things intersect, because it's a technology that empowers every single person all around the globe to, let's say, get more out of their life.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So essentially, because you're not showing everything about you, you're kind of evening the playing field and kind of like taking your power back. It's interesting because like in childhood, they have those stories where they're talking about, oh, if you know the name of a person, the true name of someone, you can control them. But that kind of translates to, if you know what that person's interested in, well, then you can literally manipulate them. And like Asylum says in one of our previous interviews, at that point, you kind of cease to be an actual person anymore. You're just a product. Right here in this part of your article, you have this beautiful chart. Could you kind of go over that? And also maybe if it's applicable here, can you explain the risk that these, high power or governmental or highly resourceful individuals, what is their risk that they're risking here? And what does this chart mean?
Basically, this chart is about, let's say you go into a shop, okay, and you don't know if today you want to drink soda or you want to buy a bottle of milk. And in a normal world, that's entirely up to you, depending on your mood and stuff like that. But let's say one day the soda company, let's say Coca-Cola, employs so much people, it manages to convince your government that it's good for society if instead of milk, every single time these people go to the shop, they buy soda, they buy a Coke. So after a while in a free society, let's say 60% of the time, people, or let's say 30% of the time, would feel like buying a Coke. Now that's no longer enough, because this big player, this resourceful player, has gotten so greedy and has gotten also into our government through an army of underpaid employees. They have managed to convince our government that it's better actually to maintain them solvent, to avoid bankruptcy, or these people will be fired and then hell will break loose. So that could start a revolution or something. So to keep these people employed and happy, parked there, we have to condition the free society to consume more Coke. So in this case, if before you just decided based on only how you felt like, so it was advantageous for you one day to buy a Coke because it was hot outside, then suddenly, even when it is like cold and you feel like drinking milk, now you think maybe of a campaign by your favorite celebrities, by your favorite politician that told you that Coke is actually better, because that way you are a responsible citizen, because that way you are saving the planet, or because that way you are helping science, you are being scientific, you are not following the advice of pseudo-scientists and non-licensed people and stuff like that. So this way, now more and more people, if before 60% or 20%, depending, would pick a Coke, now more than 70%, 80%, 90% of people will start drinking Coke and nobody will want to drink milk, let's say. This is just a basic example to say that how the optics can be manipulated to make you choose something that is favorable, that favors, that sends money in the bank account of these big players that are actually manipulating you and your freedom in order to have, because they gotten greedier and greedier. And this way, what happens is that, I mean, this is just an insulated example, but there is a chain reaction into these things, because once manipulation of this fashion happens with, it can happen with another product, like it can happen later with can cause more diseases, which leads you to more expenses for healthcare and so on and so forth. So I hope it explains it. But if you have any additional questions, I'll be happy to answer if any part wasn't clear.
No, that's very clear. And it is kind of, it's so puzzling, right? Because the greed factor, I think a lot of us that have come up from the conspiracy realm, we tend to like forget the greed factor, like the very basic nature of these degenerate types of individuals. And we think it's always got to be something even more intense and even more, you know, conspiracy type. But in the end, it can actually be something as simple as just making more money, which is just, it's just crazy to me that they would go to these extremes and that they've actually planned their whole livelihoods around this, and that they so easily can just act as though we're chattel and do these kinds of things to us. But then again, we're letting them do that, right? Like it's by our consent. So what about this chart right here with the dilemma?
Right here, it's because here the surveillance enters the equation, because basically the previous chart was like a normal process. And here I'm already saying how surveillance, because as you said, we have let them do it. It's not actually, I don't entirely agree with you there, because most people are not even aware, right, of this territory that they have, that their choices, their decisions, all this information belongs to me. Because if you can read it, if you have access to it, then you get so much, it's called, I think the technical term is behavioral surplus on me, that later you can basically front run me in every decision that I do. So you know, for example, that every day at 8 o'clock, I go or every evening at 8 p.m. I go take an ice cream. So you can send me at 7 p.m. an advertisement about a new ice cream shop, like to seamlessly manipulate me into going and buying ice cream from, let's say, another person who paid, who has entered these, who is part of the gears of this surveillance machine. So here surveillance refers to all the information that these, let's say, because we live in like you'll agree, as you said, we live in an era of surveillance capitalism, where all these companies, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and everyone else, like the business model was never to offer any service, but to establish a surveillance network that gets as much information from people as possible, and then is monetized first by conditioning them. As I said with the example of the milk, first we start in a situation where, let's say, only 30% buys Coke, and then through conditioning, learning what people care and using that. For example, they say Zoomers care a lot about the planet, so let's use climate change. Let's use Greta Thunberg let's turn her into an influencer, and then let's make her say whatever we want, even about other issues, or even a certain group of people likes another celebrity. So they try to seamlessly condition people to consume more and more of one thing, of whoever controls these cameras, of whoever controls this surveillance monster through which people's life is constantly surveilled. And then after we reach a point, because beyond a certain point, let's say once we reach 90%, okay, through conditioning and manipulation and stuff, there will always be a 10% of people who will still say, no, I'll never do that. Like, for example, the hardcore anti-vaxxers, among whom myself, that no matter what, I refuse to take the vaccine, because even if that meant that I couldn't go and take a coffee anymore in a bar or something. So, or that I was being treated like a criminal wherever I went if I said that I don't have the vaccine certificate. So in those cases, now they apply what is basically the principle of the action economy, where now they try to blackmail people, which is basically the case of where if you tweet the wrong thing, then your electric car turns off, or but that's or when you miss a payment, your car goes off, it can no longer runs. But what if you are going to the emergency unit, to a hospital? I mean, should we really prioritize the payment to a bank versus you might be saving someone's life in that exact moment? So this, it's basically the Pokemon Go logic, right? That game, or they were, it's, in my opinion, it was probably a huge social experiment to see how stupid people really are and how far they will go, where they were basically telling people to go places to find the Pokemon, but that Pokemon could be somewhere else, could be to improve your social score one day, right? If they do this, like in China, where people get locked out of their cars, of their homes, get their bank accounts frozen, next time they will tell you, just like a Pokemon Go for your survival, if you want to increase your social score, then go do this and go do that and go around, and once you do complete all your tasks, then your score goes up again. It's basically a way of enslaving people. And it all starts with this eye that I've put here as surveillance, that this thing first squeezes what can be squeezed seamlessly, and then the action economy kicks in, where you have no choice but to do something. For example, they froze the bank account of Nigel Farage. Like, I cannot stand him. All right, I'm not a fan of Nigel Farage, but I think that's outrageous that you go and freeze his bank account. Even if I disagree with him, that doesn't mean that now he shouldn't be free to say what he wants or to have access to financial services that are key for every single individual. I mean, if you need to hire a lawyer, if you need to go, you need your bank account now. But this surveillance capitalism is so ruthless that anything or anyone, because it's like a monster that feeds itself, and anything or anyone that gets in its way gets basically, it gets destroyed. They are willing to do the most inhuman things, like we saw in the COVID crisis.
Yeah, I agree with you 1000% on all of those points. And I don't know who that individual is, but it brings up a point, right? There are certain people in my community that don't believe in crypto because they think that it's not going to be yours, that it's like going to be able to be just turned off like that. But what they don't realize is that that's what we're already living in, that banks can totally at any time turn off your access to your funds. Just because we haven't seen that in the States really that much so far doesn't mean that that's not on the horizon. And there's no real getting out of it unless, of course, you are participating and transacting in DERO. So I really like these examples because they're really hitting home. And I hope that for people that are listening, you really kind of listen to this episode multiple times till it sticks, because he's going over some very high level concepts. But at the same time, these are things that are going to be of super reality, and you don't want to be caught without understanding these concepts when they hit your doorstep. So definitely, go over it till it clicks. This quote right here, I really like this quote. I think it's quite powerful. And could you talk a little bit about what backtracking is and why anonymity is so important in this?
Right. I also thought a lot about this quote to come up with a title, because I think it's extremely important. Again, it refers always to this seamless process, to the unknown unknowns. Like many times, you don't get your application to a job or something gets rejected for absurd reasons you aren't even aware about. But you exit the door of the company thinking that it's something wrong with you, that you didn't have the skills, or that it was a bad fit and stuff like that. But at the same time, what happens is that if we have an adversary in something, it can be an adversary in anything, at work, it can be in a social circle, like people we disagree with, or in a political circle, people with whom we have different political ideas, or a simple fight in the street. We just, met each other different time, had a fight, or at least it wasn't a pleasant exchange. So that person now has, let's say, is hostile towards you. Then if that person is resourceful enough, then he can go and access information about you, be it about, I don't know, your finances, be it about your job, be it about your habits, be it about, and so on and so forth. And then that thing can be used to blackmail you, or to condition you to do something that benefits them. For example, data backtracking refers exactly to this, that once you encounter an adversary in real life, and that adversary gets a drop of information from you, right? Let's say, for example, in crypto, we have all had our fights online, right? We have had our fights when we were in opposite camps. And what happens, what if on the other side of the fight, you are fighting on Reddit, and on the other side, you have a person who has a friend who works for Reddit. And what happens that if the fight gets hot enough, then that person will have an incentive to ask his friend for a favor, to look up what your email address is, and maybe to try to hack your Reddit account, or maybe to try to hack and spam from your Reddit account, to defame you, and so on and so forth. So all this data backtracking is possible simply because information is not encrypted, but it exists in a pool of unencrypted data where you insert one drop, one line about something, and you are managed to access everything else that the pool has managed to accumulate about that person. So in this sense, today we live in a world where this is possible. This is why we have to be extremely careful. Like as a person, I moved a lot, so I never lived at home. So I'm always very careful because you never know if you get in conflict with a person. I mean, even when I hire a lawyer or an accountant or someone like that does damages, there is a propensity for these people to use their experience as a way to blackmail you. Like the first reaction, right, when you enter a negotiation is, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to pay you for the damage I did because it happens and it was a professional mistake. So I have found myself countless times in this situation, and it's a situation in which you need to treat carefully, right? To not get angry, to keep a cool head, to inform yourself, to hire another and stuff like, because if you, let's say, flip, or if you lose control of the situation, then if these people know, for example, because you had a previous lawyer, or you had, let's say, you have an acquaintance in common, and they know that you are a hothead, and they might try to on purpose, right, to make you lose your temper and stuff like that. Now, this can happen on many levels, and data backtracking allows people, your adversary, to know what exactly what's the easiest way to get to you, so that they don't give you something they owe you, so that they can practically blackmail you. Because let's not forget, surveillance, and there is this very good book that one of my favorite investigative journalists wrote, like Whitney Webb on Epstein. You can see that surveillance existed as a way to gather dirt on people and later blackmail them. So considering all the databases that we have today, and recently there were a lot this headline about the US government buying dirt on US citizens. It's exactly for this reason, to blackmail us, because data backtracking basically refers to, when I know a piece of information about you, I can find out everything else and see what I can use to force you to do something or accept something that you would never accept otherwise.
Wow. Spot on and profound. And that isn't just applicable to local people, like, your lawyers or those professionals. I do think that this is happening on a grander scale at higher levels, especially with governments.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
We talked about the BTC and why it's pseudo-anonymous, which I really, really loved that point. And I was really excited to chat with you on this section here, privacy coins and DERO, where you kind of went over obfuscation and ZK proofs and TEE. And you, from this, you painted a picture about why some of those things aren't really that useful. Would you mind kind of going into this section a little more in depth?
Right, yes. In this section, actually, I was also influenced a lot by another DERO community member, that is Objective Alpha, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And because back then I had just found these articles, so I was doing a quick comparison with everything else. And since then, a lot of other things came up. The bottom line of this section basically is that DERO is the only privacy coin, only privacy protocol where your data is always encrypted, right? The key here, because being encrypted means that it's mathematically impossible for the data to be, let's say, brute force decrypted. Whereas with anything else, because in math and cryptography, there are two types of functions, right? Reversible and non-reversible, and encryption is basically not reversible. It requires thousands of, it only through a quantum computer that doesn't exist yet could be done in a reasonable time frame. Whereas any other form of encryption, or like obfuscation, of non-encryption, of obfuscation, or other that use these trusted environments that are owned by a company that probably has a master key that allows them to see everything that is inside the black box and stuff like that. In all these other cases, you are trusting something, that something bad won't happen, or you are hoping, right? But something that we have learned in 30 years of surveillance capitalism is that if something can happen, it will happen, right? If they can surveil your devices, they are going to surveil them. And this is why Snowden lives in Moscow now, right? Because he exposed this mass surveillance program. And then another advantage of DERO is that it is programmable, right? So compared to other privacy coins, for example, Pirate Chain or Monero, DERO has this advantage that even aside from being encrypted, so multi-fold, like much more difficult to practically impossible to, not practically, but impossible to decrypt, whereas the others are theoretically still decryptable. In fact, there are some bounties around, floating around, etc., and other ways to extrapolate data that allows any adversarial party to extract information. In DERO is programmable, which means that you can trade on DERO. You can trade tokens, like the tokenization of real world assets can be done on DERO. You can trade, you can have all the exchanges you don't have. For example, the other day, I was saying how the importance of having KYC-less exchanges, like for example, a DEX, a decentralized exchange, is important because it remains accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world. And for example, if you have an Afghani kid that maybe he wants to learn about crypto and he can make money online and he lifts himself out of poverty, then it's one less kid that could be recruited by terrorists, right, and turn into a violent person, and so on and so forth. So DERO is very important in this sense because it uses homomorphic encryption on the base layer, and on top of that you can build all sorts of dApps. For example, you can also release NFTs. You are an artist and you can upload an NFT and you can get paid. And nobody can go after your money and get to you because the information today, like chain analysis, is being commercialized so that you don't really need anymore to even be so powerful and so rich. For example, you could be in Nigeria and the government could hire a chain analysis company and get the names of all those famous artists online that use anonymous identities and identify their addresses and find their real life address and go and force them to hand over the money. And this has happened in Nigeria, for example, with Pioneer cards. They go after freelancers and they force them to policemen do this. They go after them and they force them to send them money to let them free. So, I mean, this is basically why I think DERO is so powerful compared to everything else, because aside from having a layer one that is homomorphically encrypted, it is also programmable, which means you have immense possibilities on top of it, which are all natively, all inherit the native titanium grade privacy of the underlying homomorphic encryption base layer.
So I wanted to ask you more specifically on Monero. And, I appreciate Monero for what it's done in the world of privacy. It's kind of put privacy coins on the map. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that I can use Monero in many circumstances to pay. I like that. And you mentioned here, and I'm also a big fan of the Objective Alpha's work. And he talked about different privacy protocols like obfuscation. And I think that it's really important to drive the point home here if you guys are already privacy fans, to really understand what you're getting into, because we don't want to continue to make the same mistake. And the same mistake was like, oh, I have a bank, cash is private. Oh, but cash isn't private because you have a credit card that's not even encrypted and any of the purchases you make. Oh, well, now I use BTC, I'm a maxi, and now I'm protected. Well, no, because it's, it might be more anonymous for you, but it's certainly not for those who have power. Now with Monero, you've mentioned here that it's just an algorithm it doesn't even decrypt it really. It kind of just like throws a bunch of other things in there and then it's like a needle in a haystack. But if you have that algorithm that you can reverse the transactions and get the data. Now, I'm going to say something a little controversial. And since the Monero people they've already been a little bit on my case since the last interview I did with Crypto Rich, the Monero brigade started saying kind of mean things about me and was like, oh, she's scary looking. Like, really? That's all you got on me, dude, is my appearance? Okay. But so I know I've struck a nerve. So I feel a little bit more relaxed in saying the following. We know that Fluffy Pony has handed himself over to the U.S. Marshals. And it's been like this for several, months to years now. And he used to call himself the main or the head code maintainer of Monero. What do you think the implications might be if somebody has handed themselves over to the US Marshals and they had the algorithm for that? Do you think it's safe to say that Monero is now compromised?
That's a very good question. And like honestly, the problem is much more upstream. We don't even need to go that deep, because I think there is a whole economy of trust, right? And in a crisis, this economy gets exposed, like the dependencies get exposed. So of course, Fluffy Pony got arrested or whatever, and he went to Interpol. What I think, there is a repressed doubt in the Monero community, because as if they all know of this possibility. They all know, because everyone panicked when that news came out. I mean, if tomorrow they tell me the core developer of DERO, is in custody, I wouldn't care. I couldn't care less, because DERO uses encryption, so it really doesn't matter what they do to the core developer cannot decrypt, cannot break encryption. Nobody can break encryption. But in Monero, what happened is all hell broke loose, and they started attacking. And I too got attacked on Twitter for pointing this out, that you have no such trust dependency on DERO. I mean, we don't care what happens to X or Y, because it uses encryption. Data is encrypted. It's unbreakable. It cannot be reversed. Whereas when you use obfuscation, of course, there is this risk, because it's a possibility. Now, without going too deep into the technicals, I think it's important to point out that I believe there are people, Monero users themselves. Of course, Monero has a great network effect. And as I said, having been in crypto for a long time, I know that network matters. And in my opinion, like that's, for example, in DERO's case, I do my best to work on DERO's network effect, to spread the word about it in real life to people that I know, because it's extremely important, in my opinion. Even if people hear once about DERO today, and then in 2 years, DERO grows, has a big wave, adoption wave. And these people that are ordinary, normal users are much more likely to come and join and have an understanding of what it does. That is basically unbreakable privacy. But in Monero, the community has this repressed doubt inside, which comes out every time there is a crisis of that kind. Like Fluffy Pony, for example, and Interpol, and what could have happened there. I don't even want to speculate, right? Because I just don't want to get into private matters or stuff of a person. But the fact that so many people got so nervous about it tells me that there is something broken with this technology. It's not as trustless as DERO, because honestly, I don't care. Like Captain disappeared, I couldn't care less. I still had my coins in my wallet. I just kept going and waiting till things picked up again, right? So this is basically, I think, the best way to frame it, so people understand the importance of not having a trust dependency. Because when you have a trust dependency, then you are not really safe. As I said, in these 30 years of surveillance capitalism, we have seen that if something can happen, it happens. If it's not mathematically impossible, it happens. And with encryption, it's mathematically impossible. And that's why my choice in terms of privacy coin is just DERO, and I don't trust and use anything else.
Well said. Excellently said. And obfuscation still at the end of the day uses plain text. And from my understanding, albeit, I'm a beginner at these things, I believe that the homomorphic encryption is like double blind. So because there's no algorithm, it uses a whole different type of encryption,
right,
that Captain could be taken into custody and he wouldn't have the answers. Like they could torture him till he dies, but he wouldn't be able to give them up those answers because he does not possess them himself. So it's
you can break encryption.
Correct. Yeah. So excellent. Yeah. All right. I feel like the other ones you talked about here with ZK proofs, and then you're mentioning here, like secret network uses trusted environment encryption, which is an Intel tech. Well, I don't really want to put my trust in something that was created by companies that are actively working against us. So yeah, with black boxes and even. All right. So we're going to skip this part about mining, and we're just going to go back over to our questions. I really feel like you bring such a valuable composite of information and higher minded observation to DERO. And I really want to recognize you for that. So thank you for sharing everything that you've been sharing. What are some of the things that you think that DERO would need in order to have like a mass scale adoption? Like what kinds of things that studying, you've seen a lot of other projects and you've seen them come and go or whatever. If you were to speak to other community developers, what kinds of game-changing projects would you suggest that they consider developing? Like what, in your opinion, would be bringing immense value to DERO?
Right. I believe that, first of all, it's important to acknowledge that, in my opinion, what in all the projects that I've seen, I mean, through the years and stuff, there are 1,000 ways in which projects can fail. And they all boil down to not being honest to themselves, right? To accepting a lie and saying, that's the best we can do now, let's pretend we are better. And in that sense, DERO has got everything. Everything is very tight. The tag does exactly what it says it does. The team that is anonymous, but it has a history, a track record of their competence and of their transparency and of open communication with the community and of delivering on its promises. In fact, Stargate was delivered, and I believe this has built a very good and consolidated relationship with the DERO community. Unless timing is important, like even from a historical perspective, DERO couldn't have happened at a better time. So I think this would have been a critical performance factor, because if it was already delivered in 2018, 17, 19, when everything was loose, people really didn't care much, right? As Zuckerberg even, I think, said that, privacy now, nobody even is accepted that violation of privacy is normal. It's a new social norm. Whereas today, the tide has changed. Like the tide is turning in favor of privacy, and DERO is here. So I think it has a great market fit for today's market, for today's world, for all the challenges, for all the obstacles we are facing and we are trying to navigate through. So as a developer, I believe it's important. And as a community member, like what I like to do myself most is to spread the word about DERO, to increase awareness about DERO so people know about it. Because honestly, I think there is nothing missing here for DERO to not grow. I think exponential growth will kick in at some point. And a lot of people who are trying to time it, who are trying to buy the absolute bottom, to trade it and stuff, it's really stupid, in my opinion, to try and trade DERO. You just buy and hold, because it's not going anywhere. The tech has been delivered, is ready, is getting hardened day after day. And a lot of applications, wallets, better wallets and stuff are being built already. So in my opinion, everything is in place. For now, just the chemistry will do its thing. And there is already a lot of chemistry, a lot of things happening in DERO. However, if I could speak to a developer, and one day I hope to build something myself in DERO, but if I could speak to developers, I would say we really need a mobile wallet, because that's useful. At some point, as I said, privacy is going more and more mainstream. I am having this conversation more and more. I mean, with normal people who are not crypto enthusiasts, who are people with normal jobs, 9-to-5 jobs, students and stuff. And these people, when you tell them about DERO, they want to try it. And it's not really easy nowadays, because I run a node and I use the CLI wallet, but I cannot, it's a bit complex, right? To tell people you need to download and then wait for the node to sync. And then, so mobile wallet is what I would say. And then to make the whole, I think, a better ETH bridge. Now, I know this is a delicate topic, but getting people, even to maybe, people, other crypto enthusiasts, to get it to DERO and to get even a wrapped version of DERO that they can then unwrap, is great, because a lot of people are stuck on ETH. And if we build a bridge, I think there is already a bridge, but I mean something that can apply to Uniswap. I don't know why now, what is the technical problem there exactly, but having DERO on Uniswap, in my opinion, would be great, because it would bring a lot of liquidity and it would create a way for people to opt out of the surveillance economy. And of course, there will be a lot of gamblers who will just buy it too old, but a lot of others will probably claim it, unwrap it, and get the real DERO and join the ecosystem. I think that would be very important. And then, so a DEX, I think we need Uniswap, and then to also get a lot of liquidity from existing transparent chains, because then we could see all this liquidity on DERO, and then we could see much more activity on NFTs and all the other dApps, etc. And I would love to see also a social media app on DERO. I'm not sure if that's possible, but I would love to see that, where everything that uses microtransactions on chain with DERO. I'd love to see them as a censorship-proof and surveillance-proof environment for sanctuary for free speech, let's say. So to summarize, I would say mobile, get DERO, Uniswap, and a cool social media app would be great, like a sanctuary of free speech.
Excellent. Yeah, I've heard some whispers about, well, I've heard some things that may be coming down the pipeline. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll discover as those are unveiled to us. I think those are great ideas. And so, what about the community? As far as your participation and being a member of the DERO community, what advice would you give to those of us who are in DERO community to help kind of like foster more adoption or to just, increase our stability as a community?
Right. The community, I love it. It's my favorite crypto community. It's the only community where I feel at home. I feel like people see things the exact same way as I see them. I don't even need to talk much. It's like, when you meet those people that you just get along, you just do your things, and suddenly everyone is a team player. You don't need to explain how the game is played. And that's exactly how I feel in DERO, because first of all, everyone is much more knowledgeable than me. I learn a lot. I don't speak much in the DERO Discord, but trust me, every day I log in there and I search stuff, because I want to know what Captain said about this or that, and I learn stuff that way. I have learned a lot of things that way. It's like some sort of encyclopedia for me, like Wikipedia of cryptography. That's where I go when I want an opinion on something or that or this, because everyone is so knowledgeable. The signal to noise ratio is the best I've seen in crypto. It has as I said, a really consolidated relationship between community and the core team, because the core team has been delivering consistently, has kept their word despite the FUD, despite all the attacks. They have survived by sticking to their core mission. And I think this is so important, because DERO has such an inspirational core mission that it draws people in. And then I have seen in the community also people with whom maybe I don't agree 100%, but that's fine. And that's great, because they are all smart people, extremely smart people. I mean, nobody says or does things out of spite. Yeah, there is maybe some event that we are all human, we all had, but in the end, people, I have noticed that they manage to find it's like a huge family, because we understand that there is a lot more at stake here than me versus you in a debate over some little technical detail, right? So people always manage to find common ground. And this is what I've been saying, that having followed the crypto projects for so long, all projects reach a point as they grow where they break apart, where they tend to centralize around one figure, around one thing. Whereas in DERO, you see the opposite. You have a very open core team that tries to engage the community, that doesn't look for reasons to split, because there could have, it's very easy to find a reason, a pretext to split the community or to purge someone or something like that. But it's always working to find common ground, which makes them great leaders, because I think leadership is about finding common ground. And the core team captain, I don't know, for me, the core team is captain. So captain really is a great leader, because he's always trying to find common ground, to bring people together and to acknowledge their contributions and to encourage them, which I think this is like produces a reinforcing effect on everyone to contribute more and more. This is why I haven't, seriously, my position on DERO is only consolidated. Like in the beginning, I even was a bit skeptic because I heard those rumors and that. But then, as I said, I keep researching, double checking to verify on my own. And I just grew more and more fond of the project, more passionate about it. My appreciation for the team's work grew exponentially. So also to your previous question, I said, I don't see anything missing here. I think it's just a matter of time before as adoption grows and we all grow with DERO, and then also our work can be much more beautiful. When you work on a coin that is much more, you have a lot more tools to work with and stuff. And I personally want to build something on DERO, although I don't know yet what. I'm still brainstorming.
Yeah, I love all that you said, and I absolutely agree with how you said about Captain. I think that Captain's behavior is so it's almost like he's not even human. He's so intelligent, but so compassionate and so kind and so level-headed. Like Captain's never lost his temper. He's always so inclusive, and it's really inspiring because the community really does kind of follow the leader, right? Like we are a reflection of the energy that Captain has put into this project. And I do feel like every time I think about DERO, I'm so honored and grateful to be a part of this community because they are so smart and so integrous. And you're just like you said, everything, it's usually aligned with how I feel as well. And yeah, little, like stylization differences, if you will. But at the end of the day, we all know that what's coming down the pipeline for us in terms of the global social stage, is it's going to be war. And so we're preparing ourselves right now. And I do think that anybody interested in getting involved with DERO, either just being a community member or building projects, I think now is a great time for it. So I'm very interested to see what you will come up with, because you have like just this really great perspective. And yeah, I'm excited for your projects. And I think that that kind of sums it up. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners today?
As you said, I also feel extremely lucky to be in there so early. And I believe that every single one of us contributions will be key. So I believe everyone must contribute the way they can. And we must all try to be team players. Like myself, I always try to be a team player, and everyone focus on what we are good at and let others do what they are good at and be grateful to each other. And other than that, I think we have a bright future ahead of us. And if others are preparing for war, I think we will absorb that hostility with peace and we will just move forward. I think DERO is a really empowering tool.
Absolutely. Well, TechLeaks, I am so grateful that you took the time to sit with me today and chat. I think you bring a lot of really great points to the table, and it would behoove us as a collective community to listen to this interview a couple of times until what he's saying really sinks in, because it's valuable and it's life-changing, and being ahead of the game can be life-saving in the end. So where can our listeners, who I'm sure would love to keep up with your work and insightful analyses, where can they find your work and keep up to date with your tech journalism?
Thank you so much again. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure for me to talk to you tonight. Your listeners, you can follow me on Twitter. I am TechLeaks24 on Twitter. That's where I post the most, because I then occasionally write, like when I feel really inspired, like with DERO. And I write as crypto analyst on Medium, and you can see my username there. And then I am also hanging around in the DERO Discord, so you can also catch up with me there and contact me in Discord. But probably if you want to be up to date with my daily commentary of what happens in the crypto markets and stuff like that, that's the best place to follow me, is Twitter for now.
Okay, and I will post all of these links in the description box below. Be sure and follow, and also be sure and follow DERO Project, and do join the DERO Discords. There's 2 at least, with a bunch more branching out all the time. Thank you so much once again, TechLeaks24. Absolute pleasure and honor, and I look forward to possibly having a follow-up conversation in the near future here.
Same here. Maybe to discuss something I built.
Yeah. Excellent. Alrighty. Well, until next time, I will see you guys in the next episode.